I was inducted into the Army at Jefferson Barracks at St. Louis. Within a week, we were sent to Camp Swift, Texas, near Austin, about 40 miles from Austin, to have our basic and extended training in preparation for going to one of the battlegrounds, building bridges for them to be able to cross the rivers where the bridges had been blown out. I was sent from Camp Swift, Texas, to the Philippines. This is a little funny memory for me. We were given winter clothing. We have two different sets of clothing in the service: wool clothes or khaki type clothes. We were given the wool clothes to confuse us because we were actually going in the warm clothes area, which we did go, and they took the clothes back and took the khaki. Well, that's the point. But anyway, it happened. We got on a ship in at San Francisco, and we began to sail to the Asiatic area, and we sailed zigzag to keep a torpedo from hitting us. In other words, we would go one way, then move over and go the other way. It took us 20-some days to arrive at New Guinea. New Guinea had been a battleground. It was considered a battle area, even though the fighting was actually over. The only thing I remember getting from there was volcanic ash on my duffel bag. A duffel bag is a big, great, big, long bag that contains all our clothes and all of our possessions when we move around. So we went there and stayed just a few days. Then we got on a ship and headed for the Philippines. Now this was the real thing. We set out in the harbor near Manila. That was the southern part of Luzon, Philippines. And we sat there a day late, or that we intended, because of the battle that was going on. I remember seeing one of the Japanese airplanes dive bomb into one of our ships. It was just up the bay a little ways, and so we were not injured. Well, we did go into the Philippines near Manila, and we had to dig in on the beach for a night or two. Then they took us on to a camping ground, and we began to build bridges in the Philippine area near Manila. We would build what was called a floating bridge. This was a bridge that rested on a pontoon that was about 12 feet long, had 4 areas in case one was shot out, it would still stand up. So we built these bridges. We didn't build a lot of them, but we built these, and then we came back to camp for rest, and we could play baseball, basketball, volleyball, softball. So I was just kind of a ball guy. And then they'd come and say, at 1600, that's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we're going to leave here and go up north to build a bridge. So pack everything that you have in your duffel bag and get in your truck, and we're going to go. So I got in my truck, and I drove a 20-ton truck. It was about the biggest truck going in those days. It was heavy because of the equipment on it. It had a hydraulic frame in the back to lift these big, heavy treadways. The treadways that went on the bridge were of steel, 3 feet wide and about 12 feet long. So we got in this deal to go up the northern part. This was in the mountain area in the Philippines, and the water was very swift. We normally anchored one of our bridges by a motorboat. In other words, the motorboat people would pull the link in to hook on, and would keep going out and going out and going out. Well, this place was so swift they couldn't control their motorboat, but it wasn't deep. So we used a D8 Caterpillar to hook it all together. I didn't do any of the hooking, but I just brought my truckload of equipment in. I had enough equipment to add 12 feet to the bridge. This was a bridge that was strong enough to carry a medium-sized tank. And again, the truck I drove, counting the load, counting all that heavy stuff, it weighed about 20 tons. And I had driven it over one of these bridges. After we built that bridge and was in the Philippines a little while, we heard the news that the Lord was over, and the shout went up because we knew we'd be going home. But before we went home, there had to be some troops go to Japan, what was called the occupation army. In other words, to try to prevent a breakout of another war. And this wasn't too hard to do. The Japanese people didn't want war. It was their treacherous leaders. But the people were very friendly to us when we went to the Japanese country. We landed there. I drove my truck off the boat and parked foolishly across the trolley track. I said, well, maybe I better move my truck. So I did. About 2 minutes later, a trolley went zipping down through there. And of course, I was safe since I'd moved my truck. Well, we went on. I was in a convoy. That means in a group of vehicles, one following the other. You don't know where you're going. You just follow the guy in front. I was about the middle of a convoy of 150 vehicles. And all of a sudden, a gate came down in front of me. I couldn't go on, and I didn't know where I was going when it went up. So I went across it and just sat there until the command came back and found us because they knew that something had happened. Well, that's one of my memories. That's kind of a little oddity thing, but it's still one of my memories of being in the service. That gate coming down in front of me in Japan. But then we went on and got to our source and lived in I don't know what the building was built for, but we camped in a building there. War was over, so I was assigned another duty. I was assigned as parts clerk in the motor parts place, which actually meant nothing. I just went in and reported for work every morning and did nothing but wait to go home. So I was waiting there to go home, and during that time, I spent a month in the hospital. Now, don't get too sympathetic because it was a comparatively minor thing, but it was an infection in my ear that they could not seem to cure, so they kept me there, and it still wasn't cured. But in any case, I took 62 shots of penicillin during that eight period of time because you had to take penicillin in those days to bump it on up. Now it can be bumped up in its own self. So we got in there and they made provision for the troops to go home, and we went home by a numbered system. If you were married and had children, that counted. Of course, that didn't include me. If you'd been in the service so long, you got a credit for each month you'd been in there. If you had been in a fighting area, I'm forgetting me what the term used, but in any case, I landed on New Guinea. That was counted a area of battle. Went on to Leyte, Philippines, just before I got into all this Luzon I've been talking about. So I had 3 so-called battle stars. I had a ribbon. I had them around, but it's been 72 years since I was discharged from the Army. So a lot of things have happened. But it is true that I am a veteran of World War II.